Direct Support Professional Initial Training, presented by CEU Certificates. Module 3, Trauma-Informed Care and Restrictive Measures. Section 1, Trauma and People with Developmental Disabilities.
What is trauma? Trauma is the result of stressful events that damage a person's sense of security. Traumatic experiences often involve a threat to life or safety, but any situation that leaves a person feeling overwhelmed or isolated can result in trauma, even if it does not involve physical harm. It is not the objective circumstances that determine whether an event is traumatic, but a person's subjective experience of the event. Trauma can be caused by a single event, such as an injury, death of a loved one, violent attack, or an accident, or ongoing stress, such as having a life-threatening illness, bullying, domestic violence, or neglect. Trauma and people with disabilities. People with developmental disabilities experience significantly higher rates of trauma than the general population. Many are considered vulnerable, meaning they are more susceptible to physical, emotional, or financial injury from other people. Many have been teased or bullied at some point in their lives. They are called the R word and other offensive names, or have been made to feel left out or ignored. They are also more likely to be physically or sexually abused. Other common factors that can expose people with developmental disabilities to higher rates of trauma include: they may have been taught to comply with authority figures and do as they are told without question. They are dependent on caregivers for a longer time. They are sometimes impaired in their ability to communicate or in their mobility. Those with intellectual delays may not understand what is happening in abusive or exploitive situations, or the signs of abuse or trauma are attributed to the person's disability and ignored. Effects of trauma, physical reactions. Physical reactions can include aches and pains, health problems, fatigue, being startled easily, insomnia or nightmares, and difficulty concentrating. Effects of trauma, behavioral responses. Behavioral responses can include paranoia, having intense, anxious, or fearful thoughts and feelings that causes a person to have an irrational suspicion or mistrust of others. Neglect of hygiene, health, and daily routines. Increase in aggressive behavior. And self-destructive behaviors, such as eating disorders, alcohol and drug abuse, self-injury, and suicide attempts. Effects of trauma, emotional symptoms. Emotional symptoms can include anxiety and fear, feeling sad or hopeless, anger and irritability, and feeling numb or disconnected.
These days, trauma is a word that is thrown around a lot. As a society, we are starting to understand the impacts of adverse childhood experiences on our ability to develop healthy, safe relationships, engage in learning environments, and also in finding meaning and belonging in life. However, there are still a lot of misunderstandings about what even is trauma. For our purposes, we'll share a few definitions. The first being any experience that is too much, too fast, too soon, where our nervous system was overwhelmed and we found ourselves in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Another frame you might find useful is trauma is when power is over you or your power is taken away. And if the word trauma doesn't feel like a good fit when trying to understand self and others, we can think of this in terms of stress. Now, not all stress is bad. In fact, we need positive stress to learn new things. Tolerable stress is when things are seriously difficult but are in the context of safe relationships. Also, with tolerable stress, there is resolution. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end. The stress we're talking about is toxic stress. This is unrelenting and prolonged stress in the absence of safe relationships. Also, for example, if you hold a marginalized identity or experience discrimination on a daily basis, this too can lead to the effects of toxic stress. Now, we used to think that trauma was just a bad memory. It's something that happened in the past, therefore, if I can just forget about it or talk it out, then I'll be fine. But now we know that trauma is not a bad memory, trauma is a body memory. It is stored in our central nervous system and lives in the here and now part of our brain. At any moment, a sight, a smell, or a sound can flood us with old body memories as if that experience is happening right here, right now. This can be a very scary or overwhelming experience, and like my colleague and friend LaShonda Suggs says, we are constantly having current interactions with historical experiences. What happened to us in the past lives within our body memories, and those memories tell us if we are safe or unsafe. One of the biggest myths that we hear a lot is, oh, she was too young to remember the trauma, so it can't be impacting her today. However, we know that before the language center of the brain develops, we have what is called implicit memories. These are unconscious memories that are felt in the body and that do not have a conscious or factual story connected to them. These unconscious memories affect our behavior, and we will experience sensations and react to those sensations and not know why. My mentor, Mary Vicario, says that whatever we did to survive the trauma, the fighting, running, freezing, all of these were behaviors that kept us alive. However, when the threat is over, we often see these survival strategies at work. So let's break that down a bit. First of all, what do we even mean by trauma symptoms? We can start to understand this in terms of the fear cascade. We used to say fight or flight as a shorthand way to describe what happens when we're under extreme stress. Now we know that the fear cascade is much more expansive. One of the first things we do when we're triggered, when we perceive threat, is we'll flock to safe people. If we don't have safe people, we will flock to unsafe people because unsafe connection is better than no connection. We are social beings and we need connection with others for our survival. If we don't have others to flock to, we will flee or run. We'll get the heck out of here. And if we can't flee, we put up our defenses and we fight. Fighting can look like physical aggression or even verbal aggression. If we can't fight, we freeze. And if freezing doesn't help us feel safe or ward off the danger, the left side of our brain will go dark and we'll dissociate or submit. What submission looks like verbally is appeasement. This fear cascade describes 3 stages of mobilization, the ability to move our body in response to danger, and 2 phases of immobilization. That's that freeze or submit. It's important to note that these are not choices coming from our thinking brain. These are reactions to overwhelm, and they're all attempts to find safety. So using this lens, let's look at some behaviors that fall into these categories. Button pushing, attention seeking, eloping, avoiding, cussing, yelling, kicking, throwing things, shutting down, lying, I don't know, blanking out, pulling a hoodie over the head. Take a moment here and think to yourself, how might these behaviors have kept someone alive? When we hear someone say attention seeking, we can now offer a reframe. They're not attention seeking, they're connection needing. This is a small but powerful shift. If I'm pushing your buttons or causing a ruckus and then you start focusing energy towards me, I've actually accomplished my goal for connection. I have been creative and determined to get my needs met. If we notice this in someone, we can lean in and find proactive ways to help someone feel seen and heard so they don't have to revert to old survival strategies to meet the need. The same goes for running. If I become triggered and dart away or run away, what this tells us is that my number one strategy to gain safety is either running or it was something I would have loved to do in my traumatic environment, but I was trapped. If you're trapped, what does your body want to do? It wants to move, it wants to get out of here. So those memories that we hold in our body will be in the forefront when our stress response is triggered. I'll need a safe place to run towards, not just simply stop running because someone else said so. Remember, if I'm in the fear part of my brain, I cannot process the rational explanation of why I shouldn't just run when I'm scared. I'll need help practicing safe places to run towards so I don't put myself and others in danger. So we have two ways of looking at these experiences. One through the lens of shame, blame, or judgment, wanting to manage or control bad behaviors. Or we can use a trauma-informed lens, which helps us understand these behaviors are actually survival strategies. Once we can make that shift, we can stop shaming the survival strategies, but honor what they did to help someone survive. And then we can help shift these to more pro-social ways of being.
Trauma-informed care is a set of practices developed specifically to support groups of people with high incidence of trauma in their lives, like those with developmental disabilities. Trauma-informed care starts with understanding the devastating impact of trauma on a person's well-being and works to create environments that support healing. To move past trauma, people need an ongoing sense of safety, connection to others they can trust, and a sense of empowerment. How to be a trauma-informed DSP. First, assume that the person you support has experienced traumatic events in his or her life. Understand that behaviors that you find difficult likely helped the person cope with his or her trauma. And view problem behaviors as a symptom of trauma. Also, be kind and understanding. Provide ongoing opportunities for connection. Provide options and choices. And finally, help people strengthen their connection with others.